So, what that means is a church that isn't doing a damn thing to address the central issue of Christianity, the central thing that makes us Christians. I believe one of the most detrimental dysfunctions in the modern American church is this one thing: spiritual neglect. These are the two things most American churches really excel at. They're good at teaching theology and biblical principles, and they're good at fostering social groups. And the thing that churches neglect the most is spiritual formation, spiritual development. This is what Christ called discipleship. Like, Christ called 12 men by name, individually, to follow him. Then he spent time with them, developing them in smaller groups and sometimes one-on-one. Okay? Then he told them to go do the same. He said to them, go make disciples, immersing them into the nature of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, also teaching them everything I've commanded you. There's an order to that. Discipleship, then immersion into the nature of the Trinity, then teaching principles. Guys, the primary thing churches are meant to be doing are helping people form spiritually. How does that happen? It happens when someone who has a well-formed spiritual life passes that on to someone who does not. That's discipleship. It is the passing on of things from one who has them to one who does not. I think this is why I call it spiritual neglect, because there's not like an intentional desire to neglect people's spiritual formation. What you have going on is pastors creating a kind of a foundation in which spiritual formation could happen, but it's not. You can have a generic degree of spiritual formation happening from messages on Sunday morning, from a stage, from a pastor. You can have a small degree. You can have a greater degree of spiritual formation happening in small groups that comprise 5 to 20 people. Until you get to two other things, you will not have a real, deep, mature spiritual formation happening. Those two things are an accountability group and one-on-one mentoring. An accountability group is when you find 2 to 3 other mature Christians who are really at the same stage you are, who can help you, who can walk with you, who are kind of trying to do the things you're doing. They are at the spiritual maturity level that you are. They can keep you accountable. They can share from their wisdom. And these are people you should be getting together with at least once a week. And the one-on-one should be one elder and one younger. You should have someone who is spiritually less mature getting together with someone who is spiritually more mature for guidance, for counsel, for question and answer. You know, really, an elder should be accessible to a younger at all times, through phone calls, texts, person to person. Every young Christian should have someone that they go to when they have questions, when they're struggling, when they need prayer, when they need counsel, when they need someone to listen. This is the function of an elder and a younger. Well, you don't have elders and youngers in one-on-one situations at churches at all, hardly. You don't have the accountability groups at all, hardly. You have small groups that are full of immature Christians, mostly, that couldn't begin to provide spiritual formation for people because they're not spiritually formed. And you have now, over this longer period of time, even pastors that actually are not very spiritually formed, who are good at teaching theology, good at teaching Christian principles, Christian ideas, but have no idea themselves what it means to be spiritually formed. And so you have an entire church culture that is completely spiritually bankrupt, and so you have the phenomenon of spiritual neglect repeating over and over and over. Most pastors and church leaders think if they're focused on theology and a good social group, spiritual formation will happen naturally. Absolutely incorrect. What that means is most church leaders aren't actually focused on spiritual formation at all. They hope it's happening. They want it to happen maybe. They're even teaching about it, talking about it, but they're not actually making sure that it's happening, and they're not actually doing it themselves. In their minds, they're like, well, my job is to administer the church, administer the Sunday service, administer teachings, administer programs, and then if I do all that, we will actually be growing into Christ through the Spirit. Absolutely incorrect. What that means is they're actually, whether intentionally or not, neglecting people's spiritual formation, which is the primary central focus of the church. So, what that means is a church that isn't doing a damn thing to address the central issue of Christianity, the central thing that makes us Christians. The church has adopted these lesser forms of church organization over the years, and it's culminated in what we see today in church, which is a general atmosphere of spiritual neglect, but most people, leaders and congregants, don't even realize it. What should we do different? Church leaders should themselves be involved in spiritual formation with somebody. They should still be in the process of being spiritually formed by somebody and spiritually forming somebody. Because what you don't know how to do, you cannot teach. The thing about a spiritual director or someone who's helping form Christ in someone else is you can't form Christ in someone, but if you know what it's like, you can help guide them as they discover it, as they reach for it. An elder walking with a younger, guiding them as they pursue the Spirit for themselves, helping them avoid what isn't good, what isn't right, what isn't the Spirit. Helping guys, right? Because it's a detailed process. It's an intricate process. Knowing God intimately is an intimate process, and it should be passed on intimately, relationally, from one elder to one younger. And then you should find people, peers, in a accountability group that can also help encourage you to keep going. I can see if you're falling behind because you all are kind of at the same level. And then you should have small groups that you're a part of where you can have different kinds of conversations. And you should have Sunday morning services where you're learning theology from the pastor, and all that stuff is good. But when you drop the main thing and you're doing the auxiliary things and you think the auxiliary things will lead to the main thing, you don't get the main thing, and the auxiliary things become sick and dysfunctional as well. All right. You heard it here first.
But speaking the truth in love, we have to grow up in all aspects, into Him who is the head, that is Christ, from whom the whole body, being fitted and held together, by what every joint supplies, according to the proper working of each individual part, causes the growth of the body, for the building up of itself, in love, in love, in love.